I had this idea a few years back. So, September is the month of my birth, and often when it rolls around, I think of a redo, or as I jokingly called it to a friend, a Reset-ember. The idea of refocusing and putting renewed effort into myself, whether it's eating healthy or writing more, trying my hand at drawing again, whatever it takes to get things to be more how I think they ought to be. So with that in mind, this September of 2022 will be branded with that Reset-ember concept, and each one of the Sunday videos here on the channel Mr. Super Oz will have an emphasis on me, Oz, and with that delve into the background and the motivation and the what have you for the writer of Everlasting Survivors and the creator of Gamble Comics that have limited first printing still available at Etsy.com. I hope that everyone enjoys this trip throughout the month of September. If we're gonna start talking about Oz, the man, and Oz, the creator, the person who wrote Everlasting Survivors, then let's start with one of the things that motivates me, the creator, and one of the big inspirations for one of the primary characters within the story. And that motivation, that inspiration, that thing that has always fueled me when it comes to ideas and inspiration is professional wrestling, and a constant when it comes to sports and in this case professional wrestling is Mount Rushmore. Who's the best of all time, who's made the biggest impact. And I'm cheating when it comes to talking about my Mount Rushmore. I'm going to talk about 4 separate groups of 4 men. My first Mount Rushmore, the 4 men who influenced me at the earliest of ages, the 4 men who come to mind when I think of my earliest and most pivotal memories when it comes to professional wrestling. My first Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling would be Flying Brian Pillman, the Natural Dustin Rhodes, the All-American Ron Simmons, and the Man Called Sting. Each man really fits a different, or not fits, but fills a different driving factor when it comes to what really inspired a young me to want to be a wrestler, and in the now inspires still the current me to want to write. Flying Brian Pillman was the epitome of, oh my goodness, this can happen. He was the first person when I heard him be introduced from Cincinnati, Ohio. I was like, that's a place I know, that's a place I've been, he's the person who makes this an achievable dream. He's the person who and you know, obviously on top of all that, he was excellent. But even if he hadn't been excellent in a 5 or 6 year old mind, 7, whatever, uh, a young me thought this guy, he is the embodiment of it can be done, and that's just such a powerful thing for a young mind. In a very similar vein, the natural Dustin Rhodes was um, the carrying on of a legacy. The idea of, can you be more than what came before you? Can you even measure up? Dustin Rhodes was a guy I remember from as early as I can recall watching wrestling be the fight from underneath, babyface, good guy, fighting to overcome the adversary, and every time you see that happen, it's once again the driving force of a young mind to say, he can do it, I can do it. Dustin Rhodes was once again another building block in the young mind of an inspired person to feel like it can be done. Ron Simmons was almost the opposite to me of Dustin Rhodes. Not that he didn't overcome, but every time I heard the All-American Ron Simmons, and they went over how he was a standout from the Florida Seminoles, and they would play the montage of him running and show the clips of him succeeding in another sport. He was almost the antithesis, the opposite of Dustin, where Dustin was the can you overcome, and then he did. Ron was the, in my mind at least, was the definition of a made man, a star. Just by his sheer presence was a star, and Sting to me very much was a blend of the two. He was the clear cut top guy, but he was also like Dustin, a man who had to overcome all kinds of adversity within the context of the story. So my first top 4, my first Mount Rushmore that I can ever recall was, like I said, from a 5, 6, 7 year old mind. These 4 guys really helped set the foundation and build, or set the foundation that I could build upon when it came to what I saw as what was possible from a locational standpoint, what I thought was possible from a generational standpoint, and in the final 2, what I thought was possible from an execution standpoint. And my first Mount Rushmore of Brian Pillman, of Dustin Rhodes, of Ron Simmons and Sting. I mean, they're still people that I love to this very day. So whether it was 6 or 36, they're still in getting big love from me. And when it comes to 10 years later, like I said, whether it was 15 or 16, 10 years later, after my first 4 Mount Rushmore, I had a different perspective, but this new crop of, oh my goodness. So it's not the same guys, or it's none of them are the same from that 91, 92 type era, but in 2001 and 2002, that type of time frame, my top guys were the Olympic gold medalist Kurt Angle, Latino Heat Eddie Guerrero, the young upstart rookie Brock Lesnar, and the Ayatollah of rock and rolla Chris Jericho, the king of the world. The monikers never end. But again, when you think about it, it's not all necessarily their ability, which again all 4 men have stellar wrestling ability, but it's the idea of overcoming what's put in front of you when it's Kurt Angle, winning a gold medal in the Olympics with a broken freaking neck, as has been said over and over, or in the case of Eddie Guerrero, overcoming being smaller in stature, or the fact that he had substance issues. Like, he overcame and became a top guy. Brock Lesnar, he's just the embodiment of what could be. Like, the almost the idea of winning the lottery, if you will, of born in such a way as to just stand out and then be acknowledged as such, and the rocket is strapped, as they say, on a regular basis, and it never ends. And Chris Jericho, what's not to love? I mean, the first unified champion or undisputed champion of the combined era of WCW and World Wrestling Federation, later to be World Wrestling Entertainment, but a guy who can always be counted on to deliver, a guy who always evolves and never settles for mediocrity. So, like I said, the 15, 16, 17-year-old Mount Rushmore of Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero, Brock Lesnar, and Chris Jericho is just an amazingly stellar collection of talent, and again, once again, inspiration. Guys who, to this day, there's not a time that you offer to put on Eddie Guerrero versus Brock Lesnar and I'll say no, or Chris Jericho versus Kurt Angle with a little bit of Benoit mixed in there. Absolutely, let's watch that for sure. Or the list goes on of possibilities. Moving another 10 years into the future with the 25, 26-year-old favorites of Oz. We now add members of an entirely different crop of talent into the mix. We have the phenomenal AJ Styles. This is when he's at the tippity top. He's dominating total nonstop action wrestling. He's the franchise player, much like Sting was for the young self that had the love for Sting. In this same time, you've got rebellious, take no talking down to from the man CM Punk. You have the dominant force of Samoa Joe, also within the confines of total nonstop action wrestling, and the institutor of the Hall of Pain, Mark Henry. In this iteration of Oz's favorite four wrestlers for this time period, it's just the idea that like I said, AJ is the franchise player, the end all be all. He's been there since day one. Amazing. Again, you can always count on him, much like the guys from the past. Punk, he just had a swagger about him that just said, I know I am as good as I think I am. And that in and of itself is a different type of aura, something that like I said, I have latched onto, and just I thoroughly enjoyed that do I have your attention now, CM Punk. Samoa Joe, within this time, and even today, if his music hits, he steps in there, you just have this feeling of importance, of the temperature has changed and things got serious, and serious is exciting. And Mark Henry, with the Hall of Pain, I've long thought the man could have been this style or this presentation years earlier. But the presentation of again of dominance, of superiority, of just not caring about what others think of you, but just knowing that you have that stature for yourself, and knowing that you can deliver. Mark Henry really did in this. What was it? Probably, yeah. It was around 2011, 2012 for this iteration, probably. Yeah, it was just a great time to be a fan of these people, and again, each one of these pillars of my fandom and my inspiration are still quality to today. If you want to 10 years later or more go back and watch any of their work, stands up, and some of them are still delivering now. And the argument could be made that some of them are doing their best stuff now, potentially. Obviously not Henry, because he's since retired, but yeah. And finally, we get to my personal Mount Rushmore of approximately 2021, 2022 time frame. And so it's a little awkward in the now and the recent past, because when you have non-attended wrestling events, it's harder to judge what's hitting and what's missing. So this one is very subjective. It's very, I mean, they've all been subjective, but this one's extra subjective. I loved when Xavier Woods became King of the Ring, because again, it's the fulfillment of a lifelong desire, which is something that means a lot to me when it comes to personal goals. Speaking of personal goals and desires, the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes, a man who saw himself as more than the company he was with did. He left said company, founded his own, and in the meantime dominated plenty of other places before the foundation of All Elite Wrestling. But since departing All Elite Wrestling, being on top of World Wrestling Entertainment once again, the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes is another example of believing in yourself and achieving. And that's just something I fully can get behind. Next up, the Redeemer Miro. Much like my love for the All-American Ron Simmons or Samoa Joe, Mark Henry, he's just that unstoppable force. And who doesn't love that? It's just something, it's so fun to get behind. And last but definitely not least, we get right back to where it all began with Flying Brian Pillman, and that is Johnny Wrestling, the man who is called the man who's called Johnny Wrestling, Johnny Gargano. He put out merchandise that said "Bet on yourself," and that's really it doesn't get much clearer than that when you look at what motivates me as a fan of wrestling or media in general. It's the idea of having a goal, setting it, never settling for less, striving to get there. And yeah, Johnny Gargano, Johnny Wrestling he's just that. He is the chubby kid who people were like, oh, you like wrestling, haha, been there, done that. But he's never stopped. He's got a goal. He set his mind to it, and he's fighting for it. And so, like I said, Johnny Gargano is that full circle wrestler. He goes right back to Brian Pillman in the beginning, where, oh my goodness, I know where this guy's from. I've been there. It's doable. And so my final four of King Xavier Woods, the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes, the Redeemer Miro, and Johnny Wrestling, Johnny Gargano, they're totally different from the prior groups, but there are similarities. Johnny Gargano is very similar within motivational settings as Brian Pillman. Cody Rhodes is the brother of Dustin Rhodes, one of my all-time favorites growing up. Miro has similarities to both Joe and Henry, and Xavier Woods is the embodiment of, or a very good example of the embodiment of getting what you want, achieving what you want, and that itself is an amazing thing. So with that in mind, thank you for watching this first video in the series of Reset-ember. And if you haven't gotten your copy of Everlasting Survivors All Day Long, Volume 1, there are very limited quantities still at Etsy.com. Once they sell out, the 2 covers that are available will never be printed again. 2 new covers will be printed in their place. And thank you very much. Please come back for the Wednesday Night Wrestling Remix each Wednesday. Please come back next Sunday for the continuation of Reset-ember. And yeah, thank you. Have a great one.